Today, we will learn a lesson that can transform your entire life. Welcome back to Mindset English, where we bring you the most powerful and inspiring stories that not only improve your English, but help shape your future. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a blueprint. A shift in mindset that has changed the lives of millions around the world, including my own. This is the story of Rich Dad and Poor Dad. It's not just about money, it's about how we think, how we grow, and how we can break free from the chains of financial struggle forever. Picture yourself as a young child, full of curiosity, watching the adults around you. You listen closely to what they say. You try to make sense of their advice. But you notice something strange. People you trust tell you completely different things about how to succeed. One person says, study hard, get a secure job, and save every penny you earn. Another says, learn how money works, make it work for you, create wealth instead of chasing it. Who would you believe? Which path would you follow? This was the dilemma young Robert Kiyosaki faced, the author of Rich Dad. Poor Dad didn't grow up with just one father, he had two. One was his biological father, a man with a prestigious education and a stable government job. He believed in working hard, climbing the career ladder, and retiring with a pension. Robert called him his poor dad, not because he lacked intelligence or love, but because his beliefs about money kept him trapped. The other man, his best friend's father, didn't have a fancy degree. But he owned businesses, invested smartly, and taught Robert the secrets of financial freedom. Robert called him his rich dad. From a young age, Robert stood between these two worlds. Poor Dad was educated, kind, and full of wisdom from books and institutions. He believed that money was something to be earned through effort and loyalty. Yet despite his hard work, he often struggled to pay bills and lived in constant anxiety about the future. He warned Robert not to talk about money at the dinner table. To him, it was almost rude to discuss wealth, as if money itself was the root of all evil. Rich Dad, on the other hand, spoke openly about money. He didn't fear it. He studied it. He wasn't ashamed of wanting to be wealthy. He taught that money was not evil. Ignorance about money was. He told Robert that schools don't teach us how to be rich. They teach us how to be employees. And employees, while hardworking and loyal, often end up working for others their entire lives. Imagine Robert's confusion. He loved both of these men deeply, but their views couldn't have been more opposite. One said, get a job for stability. The other said, create jobs for others. One believed saving money was the key. The other believed that saving alone would never make you rich. Investing would. One day, young Robert asked Rich Dad, why do you seem so relaxed about money? Don't you ever worry about it like my real dad does? Rich Dad smiled gently and replied, because I understand how money works. Most people don't. They work their entire lives for money, but never learn how to make money work for them. That single sentence planted a seed in Robert's mind. He began to realize that financial freedom didn't come from working harder. It came from thinking differently. Rich Dad offered to teach him, and Robert, eager to learn, accepted. And that's where his real education began. Not in a classroom, but in the world of business, investing, and personal finance. Let's pause and reflect for a moment. Isn't this the story of so many of us? We're told from childhood, go to school, get a degree, find a stable job, and save for retirement. But how many of us are actually taught how to manage money? How to grow it? How to make it work for us instead of constantly working for it? The truth is, your mindset about money shapes your entire life. If you fear it, you'll avoid it. If you learn to control it, you can master it. Rich Dad explained that the biggest trap most people fall into is something he called the rat race. It goes like this. You go to school, get good grades, and find a job. With your income, you buy a house, a car, maybe even some nice clothes or electronics. But these things come with bills, mortgages, loans, insurance, taxes. So you work harder. You get a raise, and instead of saving or investing, you upgrade your lifestyle. A better car, a bigger house, more monthly payments. And soon, you're stuck, trapped in a cycle of earning and spending, working harder just to keep up. Rich Dad told Robert, people think they're working for financial security, but in reality, they're working for their boss, the government, and the bank. The harder they work, the deeper they fall into debt. That's not freedom. That's a prison. Robert began to observe the people around him. He saw how his poor dad lived paycheck to paycheck. Even when his salary increased, his stress about money didn't go away. In contrast, Rich Dad seemed to enjoy his life. He had time, peace of mind, and the ability to help others. Robert asked him, what does financial freedom really mean? Rich Dad explained, it means having income from your investments that covers all your expenses. When your money works for you, even when you're sleeping, that's when you're free. He introduced Robert to the concept of assets and liabilities. An asset puts money in your pocket, he said, even when you're not working. A liability takes money out of your pocket. Most people, Rich Dad explained, confuse the two. They think buying a fancy car or an expensive house makes them wealthy, but those things often drain their money rather than generate it. Rich Dad gave examples. Imagine a man named John. He earns $3,000 a month. One day, he gets a raise to $4,000. Instead of saving the extra income or investing it, he upgrades his lifestyle, buys a newer car, eats at expensive restaurants, signs up for more streaming services. His expenses rise with his income. He still ends the month with zero savings. He's working harder but getting nowhere. Robert was stunned. He had never thought about money like this before. Rich Dad explained further, let me give you two examples. One person uses $10,000 to buy a car. It starts losing value immediately. He pays for gas, insurance, and maintenance. That car is a liability. Another person takes the same $10,000 and buys a small rental property. That property earns him $200 a month in rent and grows in value over time. That's an asset. This simple concept changed Robert's perspective forever. He began to understand why his poor dad, despite being smart and hard-working, was always under financial pressure. And he saw why rich dad, though less educated in the traditional sense, was building wealth and freedom. Rich dad taught him that the rich buy assets first. They invest in real estate, businesses, or stocks, things that produce money. Once their assets generate enough passive income, they can enjoy luxuries without worrying. But the poor and middle class often do the opposite. They buy luxuries first, then struggle to pay for them. To help Robert understand, Rich Dad shared another story. Imagine two families. Each earns $5,000 a month. Family A spends every dollar on bills, rent, and entertainment. They live well, but save nothing. Family B spends $4,000 and invests $1,000 monthly in dividend-paying stocks. Over time, Family B starts earning $500 a month from investments. Eventually, that number grows, and they no longer depend on salaries. That's financial independence. The key, Rich Dad said, wasn't how much you earned, but how you managed what you earned. Most people say, "I can't afford it," and stop thinking. The rich ask, "How can I afford it?" That small shift in language opens the door to solutions. He challenged Robert to make this his habit. Every time he wanted something, but felt he couldn't afford it, he had to write down 3 ways he might be able to get it. Maybe it meant cutting back on unnecessary expenses, picking up a side hustle, or investing in a course that boosted his income. Still, Robert was nervous. "What if I invest and lose everything?" he asked. Rich Dad smiled. That's the difference between the rich and the poor. The poor fear losing money. The rich understand that failure is part of the journey. If you fall, you learn. You get smarter. Then you try again. Rich Dad gave him a simple 5-step plan for building wealth, even with limited income. First, track every dollar you spend for a month. Identify where you're wasting money. Second, start small. Invest in things like index funds or high-interest savings accounts. Third, make learning a daily habit. Read books, attend seminars, find mentors. Fourth, build assets before buying luxuries. And fifth, reinvest the profits you earn. Let your money grow and compound over time. As Robert followed this advice, his mindset began to change. He stopped seeing money as something to spend. He started seeing it as a tool to build freedom. His thoughts shifted from, "Can I afford it?" to, "How can I grow it?" He started noticing opportunities all around him, opportunities to invest, to create, to grow. Then Rich Dad surprised Robert with another insight. If you want to be rich, you must first learn to control your emotions. Robert was confused. "What do emotions have to do with money?" Rich Dad explained with a serious look. "Everything. Instead of waiting to save a large amount of money, a young woman Robert once met began buying small shares in startup companies. She wasn't rich or experienced. She was a regular person with a regular job. But she did one thing differently. She started. Bit by bit, month after month, her investments grew. She didn't wait for the perfect opportunity. She created momentum. And with each small win, she gained confidence, courage, and a deeper understanding of how money works. Rich Dad often said, "Success is not a sudden event. It's a series of steps taken consistently even when no one is watching." He believed that every small win builds the foundation for bigger victories. For him, it wasn't just about making money. It was about building character and discipline along the way. One of Rich Dad's most powerful lessons to Robert was about the invisible force that shapes all our lives, habit. "Your habits will decide your future," he said one afternoon as they walked along the marina. "If you develop the habit of spending everything you earn, you'll always be chasing money. But if you save and invest even a little, you're building a better future with every dollar." He gave Robert two simple practices that could change anyone's financial destiny. First, pay yourself first. Before paying bills or buying anything, set aside a portion of your income for saving or investing. This practice isn't just financial, it's psychological. It tells your brain, "My future matters." And over time, this becomes a source of strength. Second, track your progress. Keep a journal, a spreadsheet, or even a notebook. Watch your savings grow. Watch your debt shrink. See your habits change. When you observe your growth, it motivates you to continue. But Rich Dad also warned of a powerful enemy, impatience. "Most people give up because they expect immediate results," he told Robert. "They think building wealth should happen overnight. But nothing in nature works that way. When you plant a seed, do you expect fruit the next day?" He leaned down, picked up a leaf, and held it in his hand. "This tree," he said, "took years to grow. It needed sunlight, water, and protection from storms. But now it stands strong and gives fruit year after year. Wealth is the same. It needs patience, discipline, and time. And above all, it requires vision, the ability to see what isn't there yet." "Money," Rich Dad explained, "is not the goal. It's a tool. The real goal is freedom. Freedom to live life on your terms. Freedom to follow your passions. Freedom to help others without worrying about the cost. When you have that kind of freedom, then you understand what it means to be truly rich." Robert left that day with a new fire inside him. He saw that the real race wasn't to make more money than others. It was to build a life that felt meaningful, independent, and free. And as his journey continued, he began to notice something else. Everyone dreams, but only a few act. One day, Rich Dad called Robert and said, "You're ready. I want to share with you the most important truth about becoming wealthy." Robert arrived early. He sat on the edge of his seat, waiting. Rich Dad looked him in the eyes and said, "Success is not about luck. It's not about talent. It's about mindset, hard work, and taking action." He paused, letting the words settle. Many people have dreams, but most never take action. They wait for the perfect time, the perfect idea, or the perfect circumstances. But that perfect moment never comes. He gave Robert an example. "Imagine two friends," he said. "One says, 'I'll start saving and investing when I make more money.' The other starts right now, saving just $10 a week. 10 years later, the first friend is still waiting, but the second has built a foundation of wealth." Robert nodded, realizing how often people fall into the trap of waiting. "Rich," Dad continued, "opportunities are everywhere. But only those who act on them see results. Don't wait until you feel ready. Start with what you have, where you are." He then shared a powerful story about failure. It was about a businessman who started 5 companies, and each one failed. People mocked him. They called him a dreamer, a fool. But he didn't quit. On his 6th attempt, he built a business that changed his life and impacted millions of people. Rich Dad asked Robert, "Do you think he would have succeeded if he had quit after the first failure?" That story stayed with Robert forever. Failure, Rich Dad taught, is not the opposite of success. It's part of it. Every successful person has failed more times than the average person has even tried, he said. The key is to learn, adjust, and try again. Another lesson that stuck with Robert was about self-discipline. "It's easy to spend money," Rich Dad said. "It's harder to save and invest it. But that discipline is the foundation of wealth. Always pay yourself first, even when you have bills. This habit forces you to become more creative and resourceful. You'll find ways to make the rest of your money stretch further." Self-discipline, he explained, builds not only financial strength, but personal strength. It trains your mind to think long-term. But Rich Dad also noticed something else. Many people are trapped not by poverty, but by doubt. He told Robert, "Your thoughts create your reality. If you focus on fear, you'll find reasons to quit. But if you focus on your dreams, you'll find ways to win." As their time together drew to an end, Rich Dad gave Robert one last surprising lesson, one that changed his entire perspective. "The richest people," he said, "are the ones who give back." Robert raised an eyebrow. "How does giving make you richer?" he asked. Rich Dad smiled. "When you help others, you create value. Whether you're mentoring someone, teaching, or donating, generosity multiplies success. It brings fulfillment, builds relationships, and often opens doors to new opportunities." He shared a story of a wealthy man who started a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth. That simple act changed hundreds of lives, and unexpectedly, It brought him new partnerships, friendships, and joy he'd never experienced before. Giving, Rich Dad explained, wasn't just a moral principle, it was a wealth principle. Because true wealth isn't just about accumulation, it's about contribution. And finally, as the sun began to set behind the horizon, Rich Dad shared one last lesson. The moment you stop learning, you stop growing. Years later, Robert looked back on that moment and realized how much that one sentence had shaped his journey. He had built wealth, not just in dollars, but in freedom, in confidence, in courage, and in the ability to help others rise. He now shared this message with others. No matter where you are in life, you have the power to change your future. It doesn't matter if you're starting with nothing. What matters is your mindset and your willingness to take action. Wealth is not just about money. It's about designing a life where you can follow your passion, support your loved ones, and live without regret. He reminded everyone, you don't need a perfect plan. You just need to start. Start small. Stay consistent. Learn from your failures. Dream big. And never, ever give up. Because the only limit to your success is the limit you place on yourself. The world is full of opportunities. It's full of chances to grow, to invest, to build, and to become more than you ever thought possible. But none of it matters unless you take the first step, and that first step, you can take it today. Your time is now. Make it count. Thank you for watching Mindset English. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's build a future of financial freedom together. One lesson, one habit, and one step at a time. Stay tuned for the next part, where we explore more insights from Rich Dad, Poor Dad that can transform your life. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and never stop believing in yourself.